Ryan. I'm the Executive Director of CleanApps.org. This is our second webinar, and I'm pretty excited about this webinar that we're doing today because this is in some ways really a lot of what CleanApps.org is about. It's about both compliance and making sure that everybody can produce and distribute apps that flourish, but that also we can share our best practices and learning as we go so that we can ensure that we're all complying and can make sure that we spread the learning and knowledge that we're gaining as we go along. So this is focused in particular on the new regulations about free scanning of software. So today I'm going to outline basically what this is about, the agenda, and then I'll be handing it off to some guests. CleanApps.org, as I think many of you know, we are the only nonprofit organization that's really focused on app makers, developers, vendors, and promoters. And as I've said before, we want to do that balance. Apps that thrive, we want our members to have great businesses, but businesses that also are built on fair apps that respect consumers. And so today, we're going to have a few guest speakers. Dennis Batchelder from Appisteam will talk about the enforcement campaign in ACR 004, which is the sort of the center of that new enforcement campaign that really follows up on some Microsoft announcements. We'll have Bogdan Odolinsky of Driver Support, Phil Schneider of AvantQuest, and Alvin Estevez from Enigma to speak. And each of the three CleanApps.org members, Bogdan, Phil, and Alvin, we'll talk a little bit about some of their early learning and the way they're thinking about adjusting to these new requirements. So just quick recap for those of you who don't know. Back in January, Microsoft added a no coercion requirement. And they started to let vendors know about the need for people to change, and particularly when it comes to these free scans. They let a lot of vendors know, and a lot of the vendors began to start studying the user experience and figuring out new ways to adapt. Then Appisteam in June locked on its plans to really reflect the new Microsoft requirements and worked with certified vendors and worked with CleanApps.org on coming up with some new requirements. And then in August, actually, Bing began some enforcement, and I think Bogdan can speak a little bit about that. But so our purpose today, as I said, is to really have Dennis start out and walk through the basics of the enforcement campaign and the changes, and then some of the CleanApps.org members can share their early thinking. So I am sort of the master of moving the slides, but I'll ask each of our speakers as you go just to tell me to hit next. And I'll start out with you, Dennis, with the Appisteam perspective and why Appisteam is launching this campaign.
Those of you who want to ask questions but are shy or don't want to interrupt me, type them here in the comments window. And we can all see those. And that only works not dialed in. Okay, so I realized some of you are dialed in, so I'll talk about this stuff, and I won't just give a summary, but I'll kind of go over my slide as well. So Appisteam got interested in this at the end of January when Microsoft released their blog entry. And at our initial read of that blog, where they said they're going to get serious about this coercion thing, we read this as, hey, we're already in compliance with this. Our ACRs already cover this. But in March, when they started enforcing against it, and they started informing some companies that, no, you're really breaking this, we scratched our heads a bit, and we met with them, and we found out they actually meant something more than we thought. They actually meant that if you do a free scan, you got to go fix it for free. And so then we were in a bit of a scramble because, from our perspective, we had been certifying apps that allowed this behavior. And if Microsoft started blocking them, they hold a significant chunk of the market, and other AVs would follow them, and then our whole certification program wouldn't really mean that much. So we started working, I guess I would say on top of that, other vendors, there were already a few vendors, AV vendors out there who had similar policies. And so there was now almost half of the AV market was enforcing this free scan behavior already. So our job was how do we get all the AVs aligned, and how do we make sure that our certification means something, and how do we give the industry time to change and get this right? Especially, and I wanted to be clear about this, we also agree with the intent behind this change. So, us guys over here at Aposteme come from a security background, and we think that this will be good for consumers. So we weren't against it. We welcome the change, but we wanted to make sure we did this prudently, and we got all AVs to agree to it so that we didn't have this disparity between certified apps that are still getting blocked by AVs and not being able to call out apps as deceptors when they do this behavior. So this is more about getting everybody and getting the industry back in sync, which we think makes life easier for all software vendors. So, Mr. Remote Control, can you hit the next button, please?
Can you see it?
Cool. Yes, I do. Thanks. All right. So I tried to summarize in 3 bullet points with 3 key words are highlighted in yellow on this slide here. What was important about ACR 004. So just let me try and just make it as simple as possible. And just so everybody knows, we negotiated with, I don't know, 20 or 30 of the AVs to come up with these words. And that's not easy, getting everybody to agree on a one sentence, or I guess in this case, is this one? Yeah, it's a 1 sentence requirement that we have to get everybody to agree on. And once you get that nailed down, it's extremely difficult to get people to agree to change to those words. So we view the actual requirement of words as kind of like the Bible. You don't change it once you write it. But you can write lots of commentary about it and lots of guidelines around the sides of it, but the actual requirement doesn't change that much. So essentially, the requirement says if you got a system utility and you're using free scans and intending to monetize those free scans of someone's systems in some way, then you got to make sure, first of all, that you can substantiate what you say. That's pretty simple. 2, that you don't use any urgency as part of that monetization. And 3, you must provide those free fixes. You must provide free fixes to any free scan results that you show. And there's one exception to that, if those fixes are permanent and not part of a subscription that you're upselling to. So that's the basic rule. If you're using free scans in your system utility, you can't scare the consumer, and you've got to fix those stuff for free as part of them testing your service, except for that one exception. So that's the basic rule. But there's 3 key points on this page. One is, what does intent to monetize mean? 2 is, how do you avoid urgency? And 3 is, what are those 3? What are free fixes, and what does it mean to give a free fix? And so that's what the next slide tries to go over. So next slide, please, David. And if you guys have any questions, I'm happy to pause.
Yeah, there is one. Yeah, there is one from Kunjan. Did you see that one, Dennis, in the window?
John asks, what about free fixes during a limited free trial period? Yeah, so I think, Kunjan, I'll answer that when I get to the 3rd bullet here. So just give me just a second, and then I'll address it at the end of the slide. So the first question on the intent to monetize, remember, it's system utilities who use free scans with the intent to monetize. And that doesn't mean only a direct upsell. You might be using free scans to drive a cross sale, or you're only monetizing, for instance, a recall center. Those count just as much. If you have an intent to monetize, you got to be really careful with your free scan and your free scan results. So it applies to any intent to monetize, not just the obvious one, go to a shopping cart and buy the full version. 2 is avoiding a sense of urgency. And so in our guidelines, we tried to get pretty clear about what is urgent and what isn't. And so we state that all gauges and meters and priority levels or levels of severity are all statements of urgency, and they must be avoided. The second area of urgency is if you use colors and sounds and words to try and differentiate the urgency. So if you highlight things in red and everything else is in green, that would be an example of setting a sense of urgency. If you play, your computer's about to explode on the microphone, on the speaker, while they're looking at that page, that would be a sense of urgency, right? There is one exception to this sense of urgency, is if you're in a case that you're identifying immediate material and substantiated threats to either the system or the computer, or the system or the consumer, then you can get more urgent with them. You can say this is a threat. You can use some colors on that.
But Dennis, Aviv here. Who's to decide what's immediate material and substantiated is self-explanatory, but who's to decide that? So I was trying to join the meeting, and I was urged to update my Skype, which I said no to, and it happened anyways, oddly. But who's to decide?
Send me that screenshot.
Yeah, I wish I could. So who's to decide what's urgent and what's not in this case?
Yeah, well, so I mean, I think the key word in this sentence is the threat, right? So the Skype example is not a threat to the system or the computer. It was a threat to your phone call, and that's not a threat to the system or the consumer.
No, that I understand, but a virus is obviously a threat, right?
Yeah, like I would say, like a virus is a good example of a threat, and a cookie is not a good example of a threat. Okay. So,
all right.
So that'd be an interesting way to think about it.
Okay, thanks.
Just to throw an example at it. And then the third area, the providing free fixes, and this gets back into Kunjan's question there. So the free fix means you're not collecting payment details up front, and you're not using other forms of monetization. And I think there was a question that came up that somebody asked me earlier. They asked, how soon do those free fixes have to come? So we put some clarification in there. And you got to get those free fixes provided in at least a 48-hour period of time. So you can't say, hey, there's free fixes, I promise you'll get them next year. So that would be describing what the free fixes are. It has to actually be free. You can't be monetizing that free in some other way. And you can't pre-collect payment. You can't say, okay, give me a credit card and I'll give you free fixes and I'll charge you, and I won't charge you, I promise. That doesn't count as free. So now go back to Kunjan's questions. What about free fixes during a limited free trial period? That's absolutely fine, Kunjan. The key is, though, is that at the end of that free trial period, if you show another scan results, you're back in the same problem again. So my suggestion for you would be, if you don't want to keep fixing it free forever, that you stop giving them a free scan once that free trial period is over. And then Cash asked the question. He says, can you use colors for threats like malware and viruses? And absolutely, you can. I think the only thing to look out for there, Cash, is that when we see apps that do this, we spend more time checking to make sure that it's truly a threat. And we'll look at false positives and false negatives to make sure it's really an effective AV on the machine. But yes, you can do that because a virus and malware are examples of immediate material threats to system and consumer. So did that answer your questions, both Kunjan and Cash? Looks like a yes. Shrishal asks, will require email during the trial be a violation of 3B? No, Shrishal, you can ask for no more than an email. How's that for a way to put it? So email is absolutely fine, but not more, because you need a way to go try and upsell them. We all understand that. We get it. Okay, Serge N, I don't know what LLE means.
I'm so glad you said that.
I'm sorry that was the wrong chat. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
No wonder. A lot of us were wondering, is that some new cool acronym that our kids came up with that we forgot? Okay.
Yeah, I was going to go Google it and see what happens.
And then Cash has a question there too, Dennis.
Okay, Cash asks, can a trial be a one-time fix? Yeah, you can offer as long as the rule is you got to be able to fix the results you show. Right. So if you show on your free scan results 1,000 things items that you think need to be addressed, you got to fix all 1,000 of those in your one-time fix. So, yeah, and you don't have to say it's for a period of time. You can just say whatever you show. But you can do a period of time too. That works as well. Okay, so I think if nothing else comes in, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so our rollout. So look, we finalized these words. It took a few months with the AVs, but we finalized these words on June 12th. And so we figured people needed, first we were thinking it was 3 months, but as we talked to more and more of you guys, we realized some of you guys are going to take longer than that to get this right, and you wanted to test it first, and you wanted to, try different experiments and make sure, what you're doing makes sense. So we decided a 6-month window made more sense. So the enforcement date is the 12th of December, which right now is a little bit less, 2.5 months away from now. We actually went through every system utility that we have certified, and we gave input back to all those guys about what fails or what passes on those, and we provide that data back to all of our customers there. We also reached out to any app that registered for notifications with us, and all the deceptors that have remediated, that we know an address for or an email for that, so we could reach back to them and tell them, hey, this is coming. Just be aware of it so you're ready. You're not going to get surprised again. We wrote a blog about it as well, and then we're here on this call because CleanApps hosting a pretty good webinar for it as well. So that's on the notification side, and we're trying to reach that as far as we can. We're experimenting with taking out some ads to see if we can reach some more people. We've been talking to various payment processors, hoping they can notify their customers, since they have shopping carts, for a lot of those upsells, so they can notify people, so nobody's surprised. And we work with call centers as well. A lot of system utilities do those as well. So we're working our way to make sure everybody knows what's happening. And then the other thing we've done is, since June 12th, when we certified system utilities, if we've noticed that they're violating what will go into effect on December 12th, ACR 004, we limit the certification period of time. It expires on December 12th. So that on the 13th, by then they'll have to have a fix for 004. And then the last thing is starting on the 13th of December this year, I think that's a Thursday, we'll start listing as deceptors, apps that don't meet ACR 004. So hopefully the 6-month notice, I would love it if we don't have any apps we have to list, because everybody's gotten the message and they made the changes. We're up to date. But really, that's really going to be more up to the industry and how you get the word around and whether you're going to be prepared or not. And that's all my slides. I think the more exciting part is hearing from different vendors about what they've done and what they've learned, and how you all can learn from that as well. So,
all right. Well, it's great, Dennis, that you laid the foundation. So that's fantastic. So at this point, let me turn it over to Bogdan, who will talk about driver support's experience. So Bogdan, let me hand it off to you. on that note, let me just ask, if there are any other questions. I think it's a tribute to how constructive people have been, the comments people have added, that we're 42 minutes over and we still have 40 people on the call, which is great. Special thank you to Dennis and Phil and Bogdan and Alvin for presenting. Thanks to everybody for joining in the call. Please stay tuned. We'll be in touch about the October 10th webinar that's coming up. Build on what we did today, and continue the forum and continue the conversation. And we'll be in touch. And as Bogdan said, please join if you haven't joined already. I'll certainly be reaching out to some of you to make sure that you do, or at least do my best to get you to join. So thanks, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you,
everyone.
David.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.